Students Council is here, and Jerry Kahiga, National Youth Leader. Thank you all for making time. And we're still talking about the front page of the Standard here, where there's a quote on a fed-up nation. In fact, there's a lot of bile online following the demise of Kasipul Member of Parliament Ongondo Were, and we're discussing this now, finding out what is causing all this anger. And Mundalo, is it fair to believe that all the problems caused in this country are as a result of the legislators?
Trevor, not at all. We actually have very many legislators in Kenya who actually do a very good job. And unfortunately, we always want to paint our legislators with one brush. We often even forget that the budget that actually the legislators use is less than 5% of our national budget. When you put together all the money that goes to the members of parliament, from their salaries to the CDF and whatever, it does not add up to 5% of our national budget. And so the problem is, most of the time, you know, in the media space, Trevor, and me, I'm a communication person like yourself, and the story is always about when the man bites the dog, and not when the dog bites the man. So most of the stories about the legislators who are doing exemplarily well are not as covered as the stories that are dramatic about a legislator's boyfriend, a legislator who is unveiling a new relationship, a legislator who is just doing things that they are not necessarily their mandate. But I know very many legislators who actually do a very good job. You are able to see in the previous ranking of the works of the members of parliament, and you are able to see some of the, and I was very glad that some of the best performing legislators are actually young people. When I look at the performance that Babu Wino has been able to do in Embakasi, I look at the performance of Njeri in Kirinyaga. And some of those are just some of the good stories about actually the work that some of these legislators actually do. And you'll be able to even discover that most of the time, the first person that the Kenyan goes when they need their problem solved, most of the time is actually the legislator, is actually the member of parliament, is the senator. Those are the people who are looked upon in terms of even the funerals back in the villages, the fundraisers for people to go back to school, and all this. I know that someone can argue and say they are looked for because they have not provided sufficient ground for people to be self-sustaining. But the reality, that is a very good TV argument. But the reality on the ground is that, and my brother really put it out very well, that we have things that are real on the ground and we have things that are optical. That they are good for national discourse and feel good, look good TV conversations. But the reality is that most of these these are the to-go-to people that everyone is actually going to. And when you look at the way most of these legislators are addressed on social media, out of person, and when they are addressed in person, there are two different things, Trevor. You come here and I see a lot of bashing online. People will call as names, but when you meet them, yeah, you are the best thing that happened after sliced bread. You are the best thing. In fact, you are the one who is doing most of the work exemplarily well. They have a lot of praise for you. But when you leave and then you are reading, sometimes my social media comments and the reality of the ground, they are actually two very different things. So I do not want to agree that legislators are the problem of the country. Not at all. Yes, we have a few that are not necessarily doing the right thing. But most of these people, look at the impact that CDF has had on the ground. There is a lot of impact that CDF has actually had. You go to the schools in the villages, and without CDF, there are some schools that would never have been transformed. You go to the roads, when you go to Northeastern today, you can be able to see at least some semblance of some roads that are happening. There is now a hospital in those northern areas. So we have so many legislators. Remember, Trevor, we're talking about almost 400 legislators. But most of the time, the conversation is just about less than 20 of them. So most of the time, we paint them in the same brush. But I can assure you, we have so many of these people who actually come out and they sacrifice even their own money. I know of a lady who was an MCA in Kakamega, and she had just come out of university politics. And she became an MCA in Kakamega County between 2017 and 2022. But she didn't run again in 2022 because of what she saw. Her expectation and what she saw was totally different. She spent everything trying to really make things very different, including her own money. that she felt like public service is not as rosy as she actually thought. So I am aware that we have so many legislators who sacrifice. They do a lot of work, and sometimes even they go beyond their own constituencies. They're able to offer help in Nairobi, and yet they come from Nyanza, they come from other places. So not all legislators can be painted in the same brush. But unfortunately, it is the nature of the stories that most of the time we only want to talk about those ones who are not doing things right. I wish we also were able to put equal spotlight to actually do those ones also doing the right thing.
Okay. And Jerry, earlier on you had mentioned the Mandera North Member of Parliament, Abdullahi, who had said that people die and we sympathize and move on. But where is the space for individual responsibility? Because that is him as Mandera North Member of Parliament. But the Vile Online now shifts to a completely different person. It's not even Mandera North who we're talking about now. We're talking about Kasipul Member of Parliament. And earlier on there was also Elachi's son, where people were still lashing out. Where is the space for individual responsibility when it comes to the legislators, so that you are judged as an individual and the actions that you took and not as a collective class?
First of all, in the issue of the Mandera MP, by the virtue of he said it in Parliament, and the Speaker who was there that day did not take it upon himself to correct that member. The members of Parliament who are also within that Parliament did not feel as if the person had gone overboard. So it means they were okay with his statements. And the fact that everybody else, even, just morally, everybody else did not find it wrong. Either the government or whoever else that was around him did not feel the need to say that, no, this is wrong, and you need to either withdraw the statements or you need to apologize to Kenyans for such statement. It now brings the question of, yes, he individually said it, but also the people around it did not have a problem with it. And now again, in as much as we want to talk about individual responsibility, what about when we have seen members of Parliament again in the same Parliament, the one who had said that if it was him in power, it would be 5,000 Gen Zs who would be dying, not the few numbers that we are talking about. And that same member of Parliament was seen addressing a meeting that the president was present. And instead of even the president calling him out, he even added more derogatory statements in the presence of the president. So he was not called out for his earlier statements that were telling us how he would kill more people, and instead he even adds more. So I think this government is okay with people saying whatever they say, as long as you are affiliated to them. They don't have a problem with you. I've seen this body that deals with NCIC, someone, a musician who had sung a song that Ruto must go. But I've never heard someone, the people who mentioned some very weird statements in terms of lifeless Gen Zs that were murdered on the 25th June. So again, even if we want to speak of individual responsibility, what about the government that sits in those same offices? What about the bodies that are paid by our taxpayers that has not made it its business to call out anybody? As long as you're affiliated to the government, you are okay. But as long as you're not affiliated to the government, they will grill whatever statement you say and try to bring it in the light that they think is enough for you to be grilled. So I think we should also call out, we should also ensure that the government of this country takes responsibility, and even the individuals themselves, because let's be very honest, when we talk about the Angata incident, when somebody is shot on the head, that's not a stray bullet. Let's be honest. That is somebody who went and aimed, When we look at the BBC documentary, those open fire were not stray bullets. Those are people who knelt and aimed to shoot people. Why haven't those people been brought to book again, So at the end of the day, in as much as we want to tell that these individual MPs need to be taken individually, yes, they need to be taken individually. But also, again, what about the institutions and that we pay every day that are around them? You cannot tell us as a Speaker of the National Assembly, you are there quiet as somebody makes such utterances, and then you want us to just pinpoint that member of Parliament alone. We will pinpoint the whole House, because you are also okay with those statements, meaning you agreed to them. Because if you did not stand out and say, no, this is wrong, it means you are okay with them.
Yeah.
And also, again, as we look at to this issue, I was very saddened when I looked at the social media pages for our president, and he was mourning a member for Kasipul, but he did not even make any, apologies or even give a presidential statement when the 5 people were killed in Angata. I have not seen his condolence message in regards to that. I have not seen the government and members of parliament do pressers and everything. But in this one situation where it's their colleague, they are all over media. And I'm not saying that the life of the MP is not important, but I'm simply asking, what about a normal Kenyan? The other day in the Daragwa constituency, we had an issue of demonstrators coming out and saying that there's a lot of insecurity in the constituency. But the members of parliament in that constituency who have not done any press to address about the insecurity in Daragwa Maironya. But today, if anything happens to one of their colleagues, they will be all over media telling us that the government needs to give us report. The government needs to give us investigations. I've listened to members of ODM and the friends of this member of parliament told the government to hasten the investigations. What about the investigations of the Gen Zs that we actually have video evidences? The guy that shot this person along Vary Road is still unknown.
Let me stay with you on that for a bit, because just for the record, even in Ngata Barikoi, we saw some legislators who already went there. Bill Good, member of parliament, Nelson Koech was there, Murwa Dekire, member of parliament, Joanna.
What about the president?
There.
Did he give his condolence?
The president himself did not go, but the CS was there.
Yeah, but on this issue, he's already up and down.
And my point with this is, if you're going to paint the whole house with one brush, can you also paint the citizenry with one brush? Because they are the same ones who elected these people.
What I'm saying is, I know there are some members of parliament who do the good job and who are always on the right side of history. But the majority of them who happen to run the wheel. Because let's be very honest, there were even some members of parliament during the Gen Z murders who joined us during demonstrations. The likes of Kina Babu, the likes of Kina Sifuna, we cannot paint them with the same brush as the members of parliament who are bringing mockery to us during that time. But the question still remains, what are the institutions that are paid by our taxes doing? By the virtue of the people who are on the wrong being affiliated to government, they are not brought into record.
Okay.
And we have to be very honest. If we are asking of investigations of this unknown assassin, but we already have video recordings, we already have pictures of those who murdered Gen Z during the demonstrations. Why not start with whatever is there, and as we progress, we cannot be moving in a way that is suggesting that some lives are more important than the others. We have to move by the virtue of even one life is a life too many.
Okay. Now I see you shaking your head, but let me hear what Victor has to say, then I'll come back to you and get your response on this. Victor, there's a conversation that also Mark has brought up, that there's need for national healing and dialogue, but in what form would that take so that everybody feels included? There was a suggestion of a national dialogue. It is always rubbish because people always believe it's only the politicians who have their say and nobody else says anything. So how then do you mend these fences and the fabric that seems to be deteriorating at a very fast rate?
First of all, to start with, from my colleague Njeri, it is very un-African to celebrate death unless you are fighting with your ancestors or unless you are fighting with the enemy like Al-Shabaab. There is no death that is worth celebrating. In fact, I think, Trevor, we need to move away from the hangover of the Gen Z demonstration. We've had a lot of fights. From the 90s, we have had a lot of people fighting for democracy, people fighting for freedom, people fighting for different. Even when I was student leader, we fought for what we fought for, and we had to go through what we had to go through. But I think as a country, we've been having this hangover for far too long, and we need to move forward as a country. What happened, happened, but we need to move forward. Coming to your question.
Do we? Because that is the statement that everybody has a problem with. That how do we move forward?
How can we move on? But you want us to investigate the death of an MP, but you want us to move
you're a
on
young
from
leader
Gen Z.
yourself.
You cannot move on,
You see, Trevor, why am I saying this is because I have a problem on how our issues are done. In fact, it is not the issue of social media. There is a lot. Investigation has to be done. Conclusive reports has to be brought.
Yeah.
In fact,
before that is done, we cannot move on.
Sensationalization of issues doesn't bring any impact. In fact, for the Gen Z, Njeri has put it that we are still talking about people who are murdered. But I must ask you, Trevor, today, if you go to Angata Barakoi, the people who are fighting for their land, and the soldiers who are there to shoot and kill, you see that's a different case from this other group, because if you realize in Kenya we have a very bad problem of trying to sensationalize every issue. In fact, I think as a country we need to we are a social media country where we need to just get every issue on social media, but not getting the root cause of everything. I was watching the BBC documentary, and there is a lot of claims that the BBC documentary has a lot of editorials which were not even real things on the ground. As much as there were facts that people were killed, lives were lost. But we need also not to go far beyond what is true and what is not true. We need also to be factual enough. When we are also fighting, and when we want to look good, and when we want to look as if we are fighting for the Kenyans, we need also to be genuine. We need also to be morally upright as a country. I've said time and again that as a country, it is our moral authority as the young people, as young leaders, to forge forward as a country, not to... You see, the problem in Kenya is when we want to look popular, we pick topics that seem to be popular, but we are not addressing the real issues. The real issue is, as a country, we have a problem. And I am not disputing the fact that some police are really brutal and go against the constitution to kill the people. But I'm saying, as a young generation of leaders, we need to look at the real issues. In fact, when we are going to the streets, let's do peaceful demonstration. We've seen in developed countries where people go to the streets peacefully and advocate for their rights, advocate for freedom, without necessarily causing lives to be lost. And this has been blamed on the police in many instances. But I think also as a country, and the police has to play their role, the citizens have to play their role. I've seen people who have been really harsh on the police. My brother, today, if we don't have the police force, we will be lost as a country. Police play a very critical role in safeguarding the country. In fact, the work of a police is a sacrificial work. In fact, if you see the salary that a policeman is earning, around 27,000-30,000, this is a sacrifice that we are making to a nation. If today we want to condemn the police for every killing, we need also to commend the soldiers in uniform who do the work correctly. There are people who are protected. For us to sit in Citizen Television today, it is because of our police service. For us to be able to move from point A to point B, it's because of our police service. So we don't want to look like we are heading towards the wrong direction as a country, not forgetting that there are policemen in uniform who are doing the right thing. Okay. As a young person, I don't want to look like we are in a L country, but we need to look at the positive and build on the positive and move forward as a country. You've talked about dialogue. For us to move forward as a country and to have a good future as a country, we need to address the real issues, but not politics. I've seen people who are now out of government, the Gachagua-led team now, are talking about issues which, when they were in power, they were not seeing those issues. Now that they're out of government, even the former AG, when he was the speaker, there were a lot of mismanagement of public resources. Talk about the new parliament building that the MPs are sitting on, the bloated budgets. They were not speaking about those issues. There were a lot of murders during the last regime. They were not talking about those issues. But we have a tendency in Kenya, when you step 1 meter away from government, is when you see all the evil things by government. But when you're sitting at the throne, you don't see those things. We need to have a genuine dialogue as a country. Okay. As a country, even the young people, I invite you to a dialogue where we need to look straight to our leaders and talk about issues, not politics. Today, if someone is eating today and telling us all these good manner of things about government, but when that position is taken away, is when now you are delivered from hell and you are now in heaven, you are now the angel telling us all the bad things. That is not leadership. Okay. To me, that is being politicking.
But does it necessarily mean those things are not happening? Because, you know, those are two different things. Yes, when you step out is when you talk about them, but they were happening even when you're there. Correct. So revealing them, are you the one who should be victimized for speaking after you've left, or should we be addressing the issues that you've raised?
The point is, it is leadership. If they were happening, why don't you speak about these issues while you are the city? In fact...
But is the issue the evil happenings or the timing of your statements? This is where my problem is.
Depends. If the issue has been happening and not... The issue is, as a country, we need to have a genuine conversation and a genuine leadership. My issue is not about the issues. We've been having police who kill people brutally, and we have all these leaders not talking about it when they are in government. But once they're out of government is when they... I want a country where when you are in government, I want a country where when I am a legislator in government, I can be able to say the killings in Angata Barakoi was wrong.
Okay.
And that was really wrong because we have a government in place and people are dying. You shoot someone, that is very wrong. And we had a contingent of leaders. We had the majority leader there. We had MPs. We had even the AG of police. And they condemned those killings. But is that enough as a country?
Okay.
We need to have a genuine conversation.
Mark, when you talk about dialogue, what do you mean? And what form should that take? Because there's been an attempt for that. In fact, at the height of the Gen Z protest, there was a call for it. The Gen Zs rejected it. So what form would it take that people will accept?
Yeah, I want to more response about that individual responsibility, but about the thing about dialogue.
It's all right, you can start with the individual.
No, but I can also just do the dialogue thing. I think one thing that you realize about Kenyans is that Kenyans love familiarity. And there are people who will say that we do not need the political class in this involvement, but what you realize over time is that Kenyans love familiarity. If today an activist was to call for, say, a dialogue session for us to discuss about the Gen Z, he will barely get even 5 to 10, 15 people. I don't know if there are other external factors related to this, such as mobilization, but if you are to have, say, the president or, say, a huge political figure such as Raila Odinga or members of the political class call for a dialogue session, say, at KICC, people are more likable to turn up for it. So fundamentally, people are more likable to turn up to dialogue with faces that are already within the game. Now, secondly, about the issue about individual responsibility. Now, one thing you need to understand about mob psychology is that there are two things. One, it's not so logically oriented, and two, people do not have an assessment on singularity. For example, where if you look at the things which are on the social media space that are desirable, such as did he vote for the finance bill, yes or no, you find that Were had done these things. But because the wave of the mob psychology does not favor him, then he is castigated. The people do not even care about his death. But also there's the issue about timing. You know, his death came around the BBC thing and all that. So when you're assessing this a mob psychology, there's really a lot of and really not so much logic behind it, because you even heard that why are we not talking about the good things, the many good things that our leaders do, because it's not so exciting to talk about it. A mob psychology loves euphoria. People love euphoria. And I've said the second thing, people do not assess you on singularity. So even if today on social media people are assessing Trevor Mbija, they will not assess him singularity of what he purposely does of every day, the good work you do here every day on Citizen TV. They'll be asking, did Trevor Mbija support the finance bill or not? Because people are trying to look for some sense of euphoria in their discussion. In terms of where the individual responsibility lies, I'll take a much nuanced approach towards this. Now, one, I do agree that within our constitutional framework, the fundamental liability where the buck stops with the president. That one we all do agree with. And I think the president has taken some steps to show that he has some willingness to engage the youth, such as the opening of the UDA Comrades chapter, which has been a dialogue discussion with the young people across the country. And some of these things may not be, it's something that continuously engaging the young people. The president has responded to many of the demands of these people on social media, whether it was sacking members from his cabinet, whether it is now a new approach thinking towards the new finance bill. But people do not talk about such things because they do not offer euphoria, and that's the psychology of the mob psychology. I also do agree that it's unfortunate that people had to die, and I think those police who are involved in this, they should be rightfully arrested. But I think what I do not agree with this mob psychology is this total resentment against the police. Let us have a flip side of this discussion. Imagine a scenario where the police themselves, during, say, even the Gen Z protest, did not have any reactions, even if it is passionate. They say, this is what the Kenyans want. They want to protest. They want to ban their parliament. They want to go to State House. They want to eject the president. Then you ask yourself, then what? In Narok, where you find two groups of people who are fighting over land. As police, you are sent there. People are attacking you using poisoned arrows. What do you expect a police person to do? Imagine a scenario where the police just do not have any reaction, allow those people to fail. Won't the same BBC filming about Kenya as a failed state? Because imagine a scenario where police do not do anything. People can go and burn State House. People can go and burn Parliament. People can do anything that they want. Then thirdly, this is what I want to say. There is also the question of implication, which we never talk about so much. This question of implication of responsibility, and to the layman. And an example that I will give, for example, with the Rigathi Gachagua. At the height of this Gen Z protest, and this is a layman question that has often been asked, what was Rigathi Gachagua doing in Mombasa State House during the Gen Z protest? It is like, for example, Trevor, you and your wife have your child at the hospital at a very crucial juncture, having an emergency, and you are at the bar talking to something completely. Was there something that Rigathi Gachagua knew that there could be a possibility of an overthrowing of this government at State House Nairobi, and the possibility of him, because of our constitutional framework, for him to overtake power? What was he doing there? What did Rigathi Gachagua know that there was an interception? Why was he so mad with the interception of the National Intelligence Service during the response of the Gen Z? So there's such questions of implication. And there's something that you asked there. Is it an issue of timing, or is it about what was discussed? I think it lies is their genuineness. Because Rigathi Gachagua is the same man who will wake up at 5 a.m. to send policemen to go and fight Azimio protesters here in Nairobi. The same Rigathi Gachagua is now the same one who is castigating the police efforts in managing all these protests in 2025. So you ask yourself, is he even genuine? That is the
main issue. Nala, I saw you shaking your head when Jerry was speaking. Now you can table your issue. But also, we're talking about this national dialogue and which form would that take so that everybody feels included?
Thank you, Trevor. Yeah, I was shaking my hand because especially at the point when Jerry wanted to blame the president for not showing up and during is it in Baragoi? And I was just asking myself, how many places does really, if the president's value of work is in him showing up, then in how many places do we really want to see the president? Because Njeri started by saying no member of parliament showed up, and you gave her an account of the members of parliament that showed up. And after that, she shifted and said now the president did not show up. So what exactly do we sometimes really want? Because I find that, and I must actually congratulate Njeri, because she has succeeded in pushing this conversation towards an emotional perspective. Because I would be able to see that you did not bring up the topic on the BBC documentary, but she brought it up from her introductory remarks. And finally, it has become a conversation. Why? Because the easiest way to do politics, Trevor, is to push emotions, unfortunately. And when you want to push emotions, you always want a conversation that is emotional. And that is why you're able to see that some of the most revered panelists and discussants that we have had in the country that have been really hailed, like my friend, the ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna, has not been on your panel ever since the signing of the broad-based government. Why? Because it is not easy to have an objective conversation. Right. The easiest way is always to whip emotions. That's why on this panel, you'd want to discuss the BBC documentary. Why? Because it pushes emotions. Why? Because you are running for election, and therefore that makes you sound like how the people want you to sound. And I have always cautioned the public that the reason why we are in this dilemma today, Trevor, is because we, the people, always forget the reality and only accept politicians when they sound like us without being careful of what they are pushing. I've always said be careful of a person who sounds like you when they need you. Most of the people today are sounding like the people because they need the people. And that's why my brother there was trying to say that you cannot be in government today, and when you get out, suddenly you have these good ideas. Suddenly you know these many problems that are inside the government. And when we look deeply, is because you want the Kenyan vote for the next election. And therefore, and there's something you asked him about, therefore, is it about the issues or about the timing? And I would be able to say we cannot even know about the reality of those issues because we only have your side of the story. And most of the time, you are only pushing an emotional, sensational conversation. If truly, Trevor, you are working at Citizen TV and there's a problem at Citizen TV, you don't come to tell it to the media, you go to the DCI. You are able to take the issues to the relevant authorities. But most of what we see is that most of what Rigathi knows is supposed to be done on air. Most of what the former Attorney General knows is also being prosecuted on air. So the problem is we are not, as a people, keen enough to know and analyze and know that this person is speaking like this because they need me for the next election. Until we are able to heal ourselves from that problem, then our problems will simply continue. And you asked very rightfully, and you said, how do we blame the legislators always when we are the ones who get them in office? It is because we use the same script and expect different results. All the time, we listen to people and are proud about people who want to sound like us. And right now, we are in another trajectory where we have a battalion of people who are really struggling to sound like the people.